I don't think there's been an FA Cup final in history, certainly not in our history, where one of the sides has been so daunted about reaching the final. So much so that many of the fans have evenly come out and said so through the medium of social media, but here we are. With the season we've had, with so many disappointments and tactical flaws, the last thing we need is another cup final against City, who took all of 12 seconds to take the lead in last year's showdown, and that's when we had a decently performing side. This year we have had, and still do have, a ton of injuries that play into that, and after the undeserved semi-final progression, it's no wonder that few are looking forward to the May 25th spectacle. On a positive, the one thing that we've all had in the back of our minds during this cup run, or at least the ones who can remember it, is how we've compared to the 1990 winning edition, where we also had a dire time in the league, injuries were rife, and yet we managed to find ourselves as cup winners by the end of it. As you'll hear later on, there are other omens too, but it's a tenuous bit of hope that we're clinging on to. It's been a season of regression for United compared to where we were this time last year. The third place finish, trophy already secured, and solid cup runs in all competitions. We've fallen back into bad habits and have even picked up a few new ones. We've failed to win from winning positions on 15 occasions this season. 3 times it's even been twice in one game, and on a couple of other occasions by 2 goals. The cohesion lost in the 3 months between the end of last season and the beginning of this is staggering. The tactical ineptitude displayed by the manager through his players has been a weekly occurrence, and the games we have won aren't usually even accompanied by good performances, and they've had more than a little fortune about them. Simply put, we could be in a much worse position than being in 8th. We've conceded a staggering 13 goals from the 85th minute onwards this campaign. We have somehow developed the inability to shut up shop and see games out. We're also humbled and humiliated home and abroad in other competitions. The Champions League, of course, and our embarrassing League Cup defence against Newcastle at Old Trafford. These competitions were replete, as in the league, with tactical shortcomings and unenforced many keeping errors. Our morale is at a low, but what will help is we're getting players back, slowly but surely, like the Butcher Martinez, who came on in the Newcastle victory and left the field without any obvious issue, but knowing us, one will crop up in a training session between now and the final. By comparison, City have been, well, City, still nourished from a decade and a half's financial irregularities and brazen and unapologetic corruption, to be in a pole position for the league and to be clear favourites for the cup final. That said, it's not been a classic season for them. No Champions League semi even. Von Klopp got his swan song League Cup booby prize victory. Regardless, the local enemy are still setting the standards with the group of players that made us look beyond ordinary home and away in the league this season, with only Rashford's out of character for this campaign's worldie to savour. They're favourites for a reason. This will be the 193rd Manchester derby, with 78 United wins, 60 for City, and 53 draws as it currently stands. This will be our 11th meeting in the FA Cup, and out of the previous 10 we have 6 wins. And this is the second Manchester derby final, of course, a reprise of last season. We've also met before in 2 Charity Shields, both of which we won in 1956-2011. Of our more recent league meetings, all the ones from the 2020s, United have won 3, City 5, and there's been 1 draw. The Reds of Manchester have had a significant number of successes in this competition over the years, compared to the Blues, with 12 wins to 7, the last one coming in 2016. In fact, United have had at least 1 FA Cup success for every decade since the 60s. United won 6 FA Cups before the Fergie era and 5 under the great man himself, with Louis van Gaal being the last one to join the great managers of the past, Ernest Magnall, Matt Busby, Tommy Docherty, Ron Atkinson and Fergie, of course. We have been runners-up on 9 other occasions. City, by comparison, won their first FA Cup title 5 years before we did, in 1904, following up 30 years later in 1934 with their second, when Matt Busby turned out for them. Also, they won it in 56 and 69, then had to wait 42 years till they could break a number of financial rules before winning it again in 2011. The first trophy under the new "we answer to no one" regime. Their most recent win came last season, of course, on their way to winning the treble, plus an asterisk. They've been runners-up on 5 other occasions. Our road to Wembley was fairly straightforward for the first couple of rounds, with easy away ties on paper against lower league opposition. The short trip to the JJB to face Wigan was the challenge in the 3rd round, and they were comfortably dispatched thanks to a lovely curling strike from Dalot and a Fernandes penalty. In our next tie, we popped over the border into Wales to 4th tier Newport County to play against them for the first time in our collective histories. As per our season, we made heavy weather of it despite going 2-0 up early on thanks to the skipper and Kobe Mainu. However, we let them get back into the game to level it up before Anthony's goal midway through the second half put us 3-2 up, and we only really sealed the match in injury time with Rasmus Højlund's effort. I mentioned earlier that United fans, including myself, have drawn comparisons to 1990 and the Against the Odds Cup win that not only saved Fergie's job but catapulted us forward on a 23-year journey of almost endless silverware and success. Well, in the fifth round, an away-tight Nottingham Forest was reprised in the 1990 vintage, as that's how we started our run back then, a 1-0 win at the City Ground. This Forest incarnation were not the same calibre as Clough's side of 34 years ago, with Casemiro goal securing a quarter-final tie at home against the old enemy Liverpool. Everyone was up for it. Klopp was after his farewell quadruple and we wanted to spoil the party. Liverpool dominated for much of the game but squandered their chances. For a change, we didn't. McTominay gave us the lead, but we were shell-shocked by 2 Scouse goals just before the break and they went into half-time with the lead. However, we kept fighting and going against type. The boss made some inspired subs and we started to turn the tide. Anthony was the unlikely hero with a few minutes of the match to go, taking his goal well and taking us into extra time. Liverpool regained the lead, but Rashford's final equaliser was followed by a superb run and finish by Ahmad, and it did for Klopp's dream and set up another omen from the 1990s for the semis. Former United marksman Mark Robins was integral to that year's cup final win, scoring against Forest in the third round and also crucially the winner in the semi-final replay against Oldham. Now he was coincidentally the manager of our semi-final opposition this time around, Championship side Coventry City. It should have been a foregone conclusion. As already mentioned, we haven't been too good at holding on to leads this season, but at 3-0 you would have thought that this terrible habit wouldn't be indulged in again. Well, Coventry managed to capitalise on our complacency in defence with their first, took advantage of a freak deflection with a second, and a harsh penalty award for a Wan-Bissaka handball for the third in the 5th minute of injury time. Both sides hit the woodwork in extra time, but what was worse is how jaded we looked, how dominated we were by a side that had even fallen out of contentions really for the playoffs. The Sky Blues even scored with seconds remaining, and few could have denied that they deserved it for their indefatigability, but it was ruled out for the narrowest of offsides. Casemiro was especially poor in his unnatural position of centre-back, but he took the first penalty, and that lacklustre effort was a metaphor for our season, and his for this campaign. We nevertheless won, obviously, as they missed 2 spot kicks, but if we were in 7th heaven after the Liverpool quarter-final, we were somewhere in the depths of the netherworlds despite the win. The players felt it as much as the fans, and apart from Anthony being a knob, few of our players celebrated. And this is where we are, in an FA Cup final bereft of confidence, instead of being up for it and believing we can actually win it. We are Manchester United. This is an absurd situation. Our City rivals had a very comfortable draw in the third round, beating Huddersfield Town 5-0 at the Etihad. They left it late against Spurs in North London in the 4th round, Nathan Ake grabbing a late winner and avoiding extra time. The now relegated Luton took a drubbing at Kenilworth Road in the 5th round, with Haaland scoring 5, including a first-half hat-trick. It's all too easy, and by comparison to us, it's clear to understand that our shocking season doesn't exactly give us much hope. Another hometown in the quarter-finals, and Newcastle, who had already passed their peak this season and were struggling with injuries, were tamed with 2 first-half goals and went out without even a whimper. They took on Chelsea in the semi, with the West Londoners having found a bit of form at last. A late Bernardo Silva strike was a difference and set up the 2nd consecutive All-Manchester final. We have a limited number of match winners or players who can change the game, but they do exist. Regardless of the excessive criticism, in my opinion, probably born out of frustration this season, Bruno Fernandes has been by far our biggest creative outlet. We look a shadow of ourselves when he's not playing, as we experienced in a couple of running games to the end of the league season. He's the 2nd top scorer after Højlund, and he's always at the heart of something creative. Even opposition number 10, Kevin De Bruyne, rates him as the most creative player in the Premier League in his opinion. Unlike Micah Richards, someone who actually did burst on the scene is Kobe Mainu. He might have missed the first half of the season pretty much due to a pre-season injury in a friendly. The 18 and now 19-year-old has been the embodiment of coolness, quick thinking and creativity in our midfield. He might not be the quickest, but he does have that special something that can calm things down, that can find a pass to a colleague, that can break up play up from the opposition and can get a move started. So maybe a lot of pressure, but a lot might be riding on how he plays on Saturday. Garnacho has a little bit of magic too, but he's still far from the polished final version and has a problem with finding a teammate in a better position rather than selfishly taking the opportunity. Ahmad, if the boss starts him, also has that spark possessed by the other two, but after missing much of the season due to injury and then having finally snuck ahead in the pecking order over Anthony, he doesn't have the 30 or 40 games worth of experience this season behind him that would help him acclimatise to such a spectacle. There are other players who probably make a solid contribution like Diogo Dalot, but they're less likely to be crucial or win the game, but I hope to be proved wrong. City have several players who United have to watch, from top scorer Erling Haaland, of course, who has scored around 40 goals this season, to the talented Scally Phil Foden, who needs to be shackled or he could take the game away from us, even if we're in a strong position. Kevin De Bruyne, though, is where everything will come through on Cup final day and he will be hard to pin down. It's actually pretty depressing to see what the corrupt neighbours have at their disposal, from John Stones to Rodri to Bernardo Silva. It'll be so important for Ten Hag to see how he deals with all of these threats, what's given us the best chance to sneak a goal to take the trophy itself. At this point, with United having won just 2 in 9 as I record this, just after the Newcastle victory, it's hard to see, with a combination of injuries, tactics and talent, how we're going to get something out of the game. It's a terrible thing for me to say as it is for you to hear, but City are on a different plane completely to us. We don't know who will even be in our ragtag starting lineup in the match yet. So, I'll have to say, a comfortable win for the corrupt neighbours with only fumes of hope available to us to get anything. But stranger things have happened though. You have to remain positive. Most fans on social media don't give us a great deal of hope, even wishing that we'd gone out to Coventry in the semis ridiculously in order to avoid an impending disaster. It's going to be tough, that's for sure, but we need some self-belief and the boss needs to dig deep to inspire the lads to victory, or there's a very good chance he'll be ousted in the summer. With the way the whole campaign has gone, it's hard to see the Dutchman being allowed to stick around, but a cup win could actually save him. I didn't like it first time around with Van Gaal's dismissal, and I hope we don't do it again, but it'd be nice to at least be in that position. It's a very hard ask when looking at it to keep him on. So that was my preview of the 2024 FA Cup Manchester Derby final. What do you make of our chances? Can we beat the odds and bring the cup home after an 8-year absence? Or is it going to be another disappointing day in the campaign, just like last season? Write what you think in the comments below and like, share and subscribe. Thank you as always for your support.